Okay, cool. Yeah, so at any point, like if anyone has any questions, just sometimes I may go through things a little more quickly than other times. So if you don't understand something like a term I'm using, just stop and I can explain it. But yeah, I'm gonna talk about like how I use image generation AI and some of the some of the concepts and how AI is impacting education. And so I guess we'll just jump right in. So what is image generation AI? So I use Midjourney. There's a bunch of different kinds of image generation AI. I use Midjourney, but there's DALL-E, there's Firefly, there's a bunch of different ones. I think Adobe's is called Firefly. And I see AI as like a tool that we can use in education. And in that sense, it's like any other tool. Like by itself, it does nothing, right? It needs us to engage with it. And then it can be used for good purposes or for purposes that sort of undermine equity and foster like a continued propagation of subjugation and inequity. So it depends on how we use it. But unlike other tools, it has a disposition. You know, it's like if you pick up a hammer has no real disposition. So AI as a tool, and this is not just image generation AI, but it's also text generation AI. Because of the way that AI works, has been organized to work, where they create these things called LLMs, which are large language models. And those are built by scraping like just enormous quantity of information from the internet. Basically, almost the whole internet is stored, all the information on the internet. And I looked it up once, and it's like, if you read a book a week from the time you're 20 until you're 80, it's only like maybe a few thousand books. It's not a lot. But the LLMs are like billions of books. You know what I mean? So it's like your whole life you could read, if you read a book a week, it's only a few thousand books. But you're drawing from data sources that are billions of books of data. So it's just an enormous quantity. So that kind of like quantity of data makes it really useful for some things. Like you can train an AI to look at disease patterns in people and then upload a patient's information. And because of AI's ability to read through enormous quantities of data, it can be able to identify disease much earlier than a human doctor could. So that's a really great use for AI. But there's also like all aspects of human experience, like inherent bias is pervasive in the human experience. So it's not always, it's not explicit. It's a lot of times it's a sort of subliminal message that can only be realized upon like deeper interrogation of what AI is producing. So because I use Midjourney mostly, I can just jump into that. Can I share? I'm just going to share screen, Dr. Ali. Let's see.
Are you able to share? Okay, great.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let me go to my Midjourney page. So Midjourney, like I'm not going to go through the details of like how to join Midjourney. It's basically Midjourney was created. It's an AI image generation software that you can get access through Discord. Discord is like has a bunch of products, but Midjourney is one of them. And I recently divested from all like technology stocks about 2 months ago, so I get no benefit from talking about Midjourney or anything like that. But for me, it's because I use it a lot. It seems very easy to use, and it's pretty fluid to use. So the images we're looking at now, and I have a bunch of things I want to talk about, so I'll try to go quick. But if you, again, like if I don't say something clearly, just please stop me, and I'm happy to talk about it with you. So I wanted to focus on the sort of the bias that's sort of inherent in AI, because it establishes its learning model, like large learning models, like from all of the internet content. The internet is riddled with the sort of all of the dimensions of human experience, right? There's lies, there's scientific facts, there's prejudice, there's racial bias. So I was helping a student recently, and they were working on a project to create a course for Black History Month. So before I met with the student, I was like, let me play with Midjourney and see what I can come up with doing some research around Black History Month. So I wrote a prompt in. So what happens here is basically, let me just think if this is the best place to start with this. Give me 1 second. Let's go here. Okay, this is a better place to start. So, okay, so what are we looking at here? I'll give you like a quick go through of how Midjourney works. So you write a prompt, like a text prompt, right, into this bar down here, right, into this text input bar. And basically, the AI will read the text, and it will convert your text to some images. So there's a bunch of different options that you can play with that. So when I was researching what the student wanted to work on, I said, okay, let me type in some stuff around Black History Month. I'll put in like iconic figures of Black history, like, and I'll put iconic moments in U.S. history. So I was like, let me look at the Emancipation Proclamation. Let me look at Abraham Lincoln. Let me look at Frederick Douglass. And I'll try to create in AI some image of them together, like talking over or discussing the Emancipation Proclamation. So the way you would do that is this text bar down here, the first thing you would hit is a backslash, and then you go up to imagine, and you hit imagine. And now this is when you would start to write your prompt. So I just copied the prompt above, and I wrote this prompt basically trying to create what a photographer in that era might have photographed, how their photograph might have been constructed to reflect the meeting of these two great men. So basically, I looked at the photographic technology, which was like they had these like sepia tone plate glass photographs. So knowing a little bit about photography, I also looked up like who was a photographer that photographed Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass at this time. So I was like, I could put that into the prompt, and that would help the AI to find examples of that photographer's work in the LLM. And it would help construct an image that might historically look like something that happened at that time. And I thought this could also be a great example for the student I was working with. Like if they wanted to design a course around this, it could be a good example for students to look at history and create some images around like really important events, right? So I wrote vintage sepia glass plate photograph, cinematic shot in the style of Alexander Gardner, which is like, he's a famous photographer. I wrote eye level shot, so it would be at the same eye level as them. Eye level shot, Frederick Douglass seated and signing the Emancipation Proclamation, looking thoughtfully, cinematic shot, documentary style, medium shot angle. So those are just like descriptors that would frame how AI manifests the image. And then the aspect ratio is the width and the height of the image that's produced. So I prefer an aspect ratio of like 16:9, and that's based. I find that size shot more interesting because it's more similar to the actual human frame visual system. So we have almost like 200 degrees of visual ability horizontally, and like maybe half of that or so like vertically. So that sort of dimension frames a shot, and it also makes the shot, for me, it makes the shot more interesting because in order to see the whole shot, you have to interrogate it. Your eyes have to move across the image and sort of discover what's in the image. If I don't put that aspect ratio in, Midjourney will just create a square image. And so I find those kind of boring. And so to sort of make it a more creative image, I use an aspect ratio of 16:9. So let's just hit return here. So it's gonna constitute a new shot. These are some other images. This is an example of what the square image I was talking about. So right now it's sent the command, and its process application did not respond. All right, I'm not sure why that happened. Let's just try it again. Image. Okay. Sometimes it gets stuck. So now it seems like it's ready to start. Sometimes it doesn't respond to your first prompt. So we'll just see, it's giving you down here, it says 17%, 25%. So it's processing the images now. And it usually pops up around 35%. So you can see how it's a fuzzy images right now. And now it comes up. So let's interrogate these images a little bit and try to figure out like what we can from these images. So if you click on it, it'll open it up a little bigger and you can get a clearer shot at these images. So the first thing I notice is that none of these images look like Frederick Douglass. Now, it's very easy to find images of Frederick Douglass. You can just go on Google and write in Frederick Douglass and do a quick Google search, and you'll see actual photographs of Frederick Douglass. So to me, this is part of the bias that Midjourney continues to work with, right? So one of the things I did when I saw this was I went back. Let me just jump to the other image. Yeah, so these are other examples of how I went through, and even in one of the images here that it produced off the same prompt, it produces a white gentleman when I mentioned Frederick Douglass, which is like, it just, to me, that's continued sort of expression of the inherent bias of this. So I then started to change some images, and I looked at images of, I put in a different prompt, which is like a 1960s vintage black and white photograph, cinematic shot in the style of Warren Leffler, who was a very famous civil rights photographer in the 1960s. And so this framed a really nice shot. I put of Martin Luther King Jr. speaking to a very large gathering of people at the Lincoln Memorial, looking thoughtfully. So to me, this seems like a really fine, like a really high quality example of how AI can present a good image that doesn't seem to possess any inherent bias. But so here's a little more of like continued examples of this, where I went back and continued to interrogate the images. And this is another example of vintage sepia glass plate photograph, eye level shot, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln seated and signing the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's them together. So if you look quickly, if you interrogate the image, like that looks a little bit like Abraham Lincoln to me, but this still does not look like Frederick Douglass to me. It still doesn't have the characteristics of what Frederick Douglass looked like. So I thought, okay, let me move up a little bit, and I'll show you sort of better examples of how I was able to get the image to look like Frederick Douglass. I'm just scrolling through some more. Yeah, these are some more of the same images where it was not able to show me what Frederick Douglass looked like. No matter, I kept playing with variations, and then it started to reverse the images, right? It started to make a sort of African-American looking Frederick Douglass and sort of white Frederick Douglass. So it was like, it was getting confused maybe because my thinking is the AI was getting confused because I kept generating off the same prompt. So AI probably thought, okay, I'm not getting this right. Let me start to play with different variations. So then I said, there's an option that you can upload an image into AI and combine the image with the prompt. And so I had some real success with that. So if I go up, here we go. So here is where I uploaded an image of Frederick Douglass. And to me, this is where it starts to really look like a younger sort of Frederick Douglass. So this is the image I uploaded is where? Let me see if I can find it here. So this is the image I got off the internet. It's an actual photograph of Frederick Douglass, a younger sort of Frederick Douglass. So I uploaded this image as part of my prompt. And then I put in basically the same prompt, Frederick Douglass seated and signing the Emancipation Proclamation, looking thoughtfully, cinematic shot. And from this point, it was able to generate, as long as I uploaded an image of Frederick Douglass, it was able to generate a series of images that I thought were really good quality images of Frederick Douglass, like seated in a library. I started to expand it a little more, cinematic shot, like seated in a library or a large room. But another example I wanted to talk about was, let me scroll down and find it. The same student I was working with wanted to do some research about the Wilmington massacre that took place in Wilmington, North Carolina. And that, I'll scroll down to the beginning where we started. So we started here, and the prompt we started with was vintage sepia glass plate photograph, cinematic shot, documentary style, the Wilmington Massacre of 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina. So this was basically Wilmington, the Wilmington Massacre was basically a large group of white supremacists went in and destroyed the city because African American and white Americans had organized the government collectively and the white supremacists were sort of wanted that example to be destroyed. So they went in and they just, killed a lot of people and just burned the city, like tortured buildings and destroyed a lot of the city. So the initial images that came up from that, this prompt is a little basic. So usually the way you craft prompts is you can adapt them. If you don't get the images that you like, you can start playing with different words and see which words might give you the sort of a more historical might be more historically accurate. So some of these were not really expressing like what the student and I felt were good examples of that. So we continued to go through and I sort of started to evolve the prompt a little more and emphasize like here at this point, we changed the prompt a little bit. We wrote Wilmington violent racial massacre of November 10th, 1898. Wilmington, violent white supremacists overthrow local government. And we put like post-Reconstruction South. So we were writing additional sort of putting new terms and new words in. But when I was working with the student about this, like the images were slowly getting better over time. So we were able to like eventually get images that reflected, and there were actual photographs that I was able to find online about this. And that's where I found a really startling example, I think, of the sort of inherent bias that if we're not aware of it, it can really, in a powerful way, like change sort of the way historical events are understood. So this was an image that both the student and I thought were really good. This came out well, and it sort of shows the sort of destruction on the scale that reflects the historical accuracy of that event. So I decided at some point, I was like, let me find an image. So here, this is where I did it. So this is the image I found. And this is an actual photograph that was taken. So what do we see? Like if we interrogate this image, what do we see? We see a group of white supremacists, white people, some of them, like a lot of them carrying weapons, guns, pistols, standing in front of a building that they had burned down, almost like, to me, this is like a trophy. Like they're standing in front of this, sort of documenting, like, this is what we'll do if African-American people and white people work together to form government. Like we'll come in and we're going to destroy everything. So this is the image that I chose to upload with the prompt. And we'll take a quick look at the prompt. The prompt is black and white photograph, a satellite view. So it's a view from above a little bit. Post-Reconstruction South, a violent scene in Wilmington, North Carolina, of the racial massacre of November 10th, 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina. Violent white supremacists overthrow a local government. And I uploaded that prompt with that photo. And when you look at like some of the images it creates from that, you can see that it's now replaced all of the white supremacists with African Americans. And so to me, this is like a startling example of how like we can clearly frame a historical event, provide evidence to AI of that event in the form of a photograph, and describe like a group of white supremacists burned down a city, like a violent racial riot. And the AI sort of reverses the image and now gives us an example of African Americans standing in a similar fashion in front of a building that's been destroyed. So to me, this is a very startling example of how inherent bias can sort of, and I have to say, like, at first I didn't see that, you know what I mean? I didn't see that I was just scrolling through the images, but then later on, I went back and I was interrogating the images and I said, wow, I didn't see this at first. Like it's clearly AI has replaced all of the white supremacists with African Americans. And I thought that was like a visual, like it's sort of evidence, visual evidence of the inherent bias that that you can see in the internet. So we went through the student and I went through, we continued to create a bunch more images that I thought came out really well. But this is another example of so one thing we should talk about is like one thing I wanted to talk about today. Let me just see if there's any questions. Do you have any does anyone have any questions about anything? Dr. Ali or Philippa, anyone have any questions? No?
I'm thoroughly enjoying this. I'm actually doing similar work, so I would love to talk afterwards, but this is really like I'm loving this. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's cool. That's good to hear. Thank you. So yeah, I've been working with a bunch of students. So I'd be happy to talk to you about like what I'm doing, and I'd love to learn about what you're doing. So yeah, so this is that example. So there's other things that I'd like to talk about now too, like so I'd like to talk about the sustainability of AI and how it's integrated into education, and what the concerns are that I think in order like using any tool, particularly in education, like we need to have a sort of comprehensive, holistic understanding of the impacts of that tool. And this is one of them. This is a like startling display, I think, of the impact that using AI can have, and how like it can send messages that are worth being aware of and worth noting. So there's other examples of this. Like let's go back and let's write a prompt, and we'll just do a quick example of that. Let me just see where I am. Yeah, let's do a prompt of let's write a doctor speaking to a group of students at a university. Right? And we'll just see what it comes up with. And I haven't run this test before, but we'll just see. We'll take a look at the images it comes up with. I have a sense of what it's going to do, but 32%. So usually it should come up now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it shows all basically white male doctors speaking at a university. So that this is a more obvious example of the inherent bias that AI is continuing to perpetuate. Like we have this lineage of historic injustice in the United States, and a lot of the AI, in fact, most of the AI, just continue to perpetuate avenues of education that undermine equity and injustice in the United States. So this is something it's like being aware of it makes us cognizant of its potential harm. So we have to sort of take that into account in a way that we use it. So there's other examples of that like every time you use ChatGPT to write a 100-word email, it uses the equivalent amount of energy as a single light bulb burning for 14 hours. So like if I write a simple like ChatGPT, I need you to write a happy birthday email to my friend Joe. It's his birthday today. Like, please keep it to 100 words. That it's done in seconds, literally. And the amount of energy it used was enormous. So, but that's something to consider in terms of sustainability. But I think another thing to consider is the amount of water that's used to keep the servers cool. So to write that 100-word email in ChatGPT, the servers require 500 milliliters of water for one 100-word email. That's a lot of water. And when you think about like how many people are using AI all over the world, suddenly you get a sense for, oh my God, this is an enormous quantity of water. And there's a reason for that. Basically, standard computer chips require cooling. Usually they can be cooled by air, or they run pipes of cold water close to the servers. And that cold water cools the air around the servers. But AI chips are different. AI chips use like they produce an enormous amount of heat because of the electricity they require, because they're drawing on such a large data source for a number of reasons. So I read a statistic recently that AI is currently using 1 billion milliliters of water a second that's like, that's just an unbelievable amount of water. And so I have a little bit of a slideshow I can show you really quick. Let me see if I can find it. I set that up this morning. So this is basically power consumption by AI data centers. So this is the energy department in the US estimates that AI specialized data center could consume as much as, I had to look up what like terawatt hours. Terawatt is like 1 trillion watts per hour. So 326 trillion watt hours by 2028. So in the United States today, in a lot of municipalities, these data centers are the main consumers of water to keep their servers cool. So it's nearly 8 times the energy that they used in 2023. So you can see in this chart, and I got this chart from the New York Times, like had a great article about it. Traditional servers are in blue, and you can see how over time, traditional servers are projected anywhere in the future between 70 terawatt hours and 58 terawatt hours. But you can see the AI servers are now, the projected range is just this enormous quantity of energy. And what goes along with that is the sort of the temperature that's being generated by that. You can see Microsoft now is trying to purchase the nuclear reactors like 3 Mile Island to create the necessary energy needed for this, right? You can see Google is now researching small nuclear reactors to secure US data center powers. And even like Google's also looking at nuclear fusion to power the AI data centers. So it's no longer possible. It's like no longer possible to cool the servers just by having these continuous flow of cold water. You now need to run this cold water right up against the chips, the computer chips, and the servers, like right against them, because they're generating such an enormous quantity of heat. So when we're thinking about using AI, I think we need to comprehensively have a sense of what the sustainability means. I mean, we just used it a little bit, you know what I mean? We just played with it a little bit here. And it's easy when you're not aware of the environmental damage it's causing, just to use it. And I'm guilty of that, but I think it's important to be cognizant of it. So I try to use it, like I focus really carefully on the ways I use it and how I want to use it. But I think there's another sense of sustainability that we need to talk about in terms of AI, which is the sustainability of human institutions and cultural institutions. And what I mean by that is like, one of the reasons I became a teacher was because I was a graduate teaching assistant at the University of Buffalo. And when I became a graduate teaching assistant, I was like, wow, teaching is so great. It's so great to like be able to use my understanding of some course that I did well and help other students to advance along the same role. I was like, oh, I could easily see, this is something I want to do forever. Like the rest of my life, I want to do something like this, you know? It's just deeply rewarding, meaningful work, I think. So now in many schools, they're replacing graduate teaching assistants with AI. And there's benefits to that. You know what I mean? It's like at 3 o'clock in the morning, if a student is working on a project and I'm not available because graduate teaching assistants have set office hours, the student in the course can just go to the AI teaching assistant and say, I'm having trouble with this problem. And it can be a resource for the student, which is relevant to the coursework and relevant to their educational success. So there's a benefit to having that. But in effect, by replacing graduate teaching assistants, and even, you know, a lot of schools are doing that, and some schools have even had courses taught by AI. So it's what we're doing is we're cutting off the upstream flow of the renewal of human institutions that needs to take place with people. So it's like it's almost like I can mention what a lot of the actors did in Hollywood recently, where they were reacting against AI bots, sort of using their voice, using their images to create. They formed together in a union, and they said like, okay, we're not going to allow this to happen. We're going to, and I feel like in education there also needs to be something like that where we ensure the upstream flow of the next generation of teachers. And a vital part of that is not replacing, I think, teaching assistants, graduate teaching assistants, because that's where you sort of get your first taste of teaching, where I did at least. So, and that's just one dimension. That's just education. So it's AI is having a huge impact. And AI also does super great things. It helps us, like I come from an architectural background. So most of my images, like most of my images in Midjourney, if I scroll down, there'll be something with architecture, right? Something to do with like describing images. Like, I'll jump to like one of the slideshows I have set up here. This one, let me see. No, there's another one. I have another one somewhere. Here, this one. So this is an example of how I would use AI, like and to create some sort of architectural image. So these are images of Vermeer. These are paintings by the Dutch artist Vermeer, who like sort of famously uses the light in his studio coming in a certain way, so that in the quality of light, a sort of intangible way that light can render a space and sort of orchestrate a feeling, the human response to that space is captured in a lot of his work. So using these images as sort of inspiration, I wrote this prompt, which is a Danish violin maker's workshop, minimalist interior with the feeling of apricity. So I use the way I've developed this sort of theory of using AI, where I'm trying to frame how to move forward with this. I try to choose words that are rarely used, and there's a reason for that. There's something in AI called the here it is. It's the AI model collapse. So what is AI model collapse? I'm just going to jump to this other article really quick and just give you an example of that. So this is another New York Times article. It's when AI's output is a threat to AI itself. So in this AI model, it was trained on like 60,000 handwritten numbers, right? So, you know, all the numbers 0 to 9, like straight through, and it was trained on handwritten numbers. So when AI trains on images that are produced from AI, the images begin to degrade as the generations of productions continue. So this is the sort of initial image, right? So this is when you start to train AI, it starts to get more blurry because now it's being trained on images that were generated by AI, right? So this is, as it continues, this is after one generation. Like you can still make out most of the numbers, but they're getting kind of messed up. So this is after 20 generations of AI. And this is after 30 generations of AI. Now they've converged into a single shape. And so that's also happening in actual AI. What's happening is like here. It's basically a concept. This is an ancient Egyptian symbol of a snake that's eating itself. So when you look at the percentage of internet content produced by AI, in 2023, 10% of internet content was generated by AI. That's an enormous quantity of information. In 2026, 90% of the internet content will be produced by AI. So now you'll have that same example of the letters where the large language models that are helping to train the AI are being increasingly filled with AI-generated images, and it's degrading. Researchers have speculated that this could correlate to diminished critical thinking skills and what's known as the dead internet theory. So that's where the internet, as a super valuable source for human progress and exchange of communication of ideas, it becomes so polluted with the sort of inherent bias that I demonstrated earlier, like that it becomes much less valuable of a resource for human culture and for advancement of human civilization, right? So, all right, jumping back to the Vermeer example, which is somewhere. There it is, I think. Is this it? No, the other one. Here. So jumping back to the Vermeer example, I put this prompt in. So basically, my idea is like, when I write a prompt, I try to use words that are very rare, like the word apricity. So apricity means the feeling of sunlight in winter, which is a very rarely used word. So like, by choosing words that are rarely used when we write a prompt, we're forcing the AI to search its large language model for those words. And because they're rarely used, they won't be as polluted as more common words. Like I could say a feeling of sunlight or a feeling of like a more commonly used word. And that will generate a more polluted image. So my thinking at this time is like, okay, let's try to develop a theory where we use really rare words and because I focus on architecture, these words that I generate, that I use revolve around that. So And it comes up with sort of nice images, right? It's like a light, a feeling of apricity and light, like in the work of Vermeer. So now you get that kind of really nice image of a sort of minimalist interior violin maker's workshop. It has the same sort of feeling as the Vermeer image, with sunlight coming in a certain way. And it has this sort of feeling like the sort of light the feeling of light in this space, to me, feels like the quality of light in winter. Like, I don't think summer light would look like this, but it has a feeling of winter light a little bit to me. So that's how that's sort of coming up. But let me just see. There's some other things I could talk about. But if there's any questions, like if I went over something like kind of too fast, I can talk about that. I can talk about like let's talk about hallucinations for a second, because I find like one of the things I find really valuable. Like, I created a YouTube channel called From Hallucinations to Hallelujah. And it's like, that's hallucinations are like, I think I have a definition for them somewhere here. Let me see. Maybe it's in a different show. Yeah, I have like, hallucinations are basically false. It's like what we saw with the Wilmington massacre. It's like the AI generates these images that are like false, misleading, inaccurate, and they're both in images. They're in images and they're also in text. So like if we interrogate this image as a hallucination, see if I can make this a little bigger here. So when we look at this image, I forget what the prompt was for this. It was like the weekend. Wait, it's over here, right? Let me see. Here it is. Interior of a high-end residential weekend house in the forest, made of walnut wood, Beton Brut concrete, in the style of Alvarado, Lucan, Carlo Scarpa, and Bridget Shem, with the feeling of frisson. That's another word. So frisson is the human reaction, like when you get chills, like when you see something that's like so moving that you actually get like the hair stands up on you. So again, I'm using words that are rare, that might give you that feeling where you can get a really great image out of AI. But even this, like when you first look at it, for me, I'm sort of seduced by the nature of the image. But when you look at this space, like upon further interrogation, there's a lot of hallucinations here that don't make sense. Like, okay, when you look at this image at first, okay, there's a balcony here, right? But there's no way to get to that balcony. There's no stairs that bring you up there. There's a window in the back with curtains. There's no stairs. So this is sort of like interrogating the image sort of makes you aware that AI really doesn't know what it's doing. It's mimicking other images, but it doesn't know that in order for this to be a practical space, people need to get up there, you know what I mean? And so when you look at this image also, you can see that the spatial geometry that it's using doesn't work. Like when you look at this, we know from human experience that like we experience space in a perspective, like a 3-point perspective or 4-point perspective or 2-point perspective. Like it's perspective, and the laws of perspective, or there's something called a vanishing point that appears on the horizon, and it's like all lines. If you take any photograph, you can project all of these lines and they'll converge to a single point on the horizon, right? So that should be the case in these images. So when you start to follow this line, like in the windows across the bottom here, it meets this vertical wall here, this sort of very thick wall, right against the window frame, right against the glass. And you can see the reflection of the glass right there. So let's follow this sort of point up to the top where the glass is touching the wall. When you follow it up to the top, suddenly it's not against the window. It's like there's a horizontal distance here. That's another way in which the hallucinations that it's creating in a geometric way are not accurate. It's kind of like a MC Escher sort of view where it's like the geometry is impossible. And so it doesn't really understand like how people navigate through space and how they move through space. But there's other examples like where I did a quick sketch of an interior space. My friend asked me to do a sketch of an interior space of some people in a lobby. So I said, okay, so I did that. And then you can upload that image into AI and you can sort of weigh the way that AI values the image. So you can place a lot of emphasis on the drawing and the images that AI produce. Like you can see there's, let me pull out here a little bit. you can see that there's, okay, this is an image that I taped to the wall, and there's like wrinkles on the paper, and you can see the torn edge of the paper. So for the first couple of images, I placed a lot of emphasis on the image. So you can see the images that AI produce show that same sort of wrinkles in the paper and the torn edge. But for me, like, I've never seen an image like this. So for me, it's like, wow, that's such a cool image to me. You can see it here too, where you can see, like, on the side, there's wrinkles in the paper, but it's meshing these two, it's meshing what I wrote for the text and the image I uploaded into the space. So this is where I weighed the image less. I put less emphasis on the photo that I uploaded and more emphasis on the prompt. So it still has a sort of feeling of lighting in a certain way, but now it's used the drawing and created a sort of artwork on the wall that has the same sort of feeling as the drawing. And so that's the kind of like interrogating the images in AI. And this is where, for me, this is where the value in using AI is. It creates unexpected juxtapositions of juxtapositions and unexpected relationships. And it's like, for me, those are like the happy accidents that can lead to sort of creative breakthrough that is not really anticipated. So you have like, oh my God, I never thought of that happening. You know, it's almost like, it's like Archimedes, like working on this problem for weeks, and finally he gets dragged from his studio and he's forced to get in the bath, and he's like almost given up on trying to solve this problem. And when he gets in the bath, he sees the water level rise in the water, and now he knows he's solved the problem. You know what I mean? It's like it creates this sort of, oh my God, I never would have thought of that. So in that sense, it's like a really valuable tool. But I think there's so much that we need to be aware of when we use it, in terms of like inherent bias that it possesses. And so there is Adobe has created Firefly, which is also an image generation AI. And that Firefly, if I put the same prompt in that I put in earlier, like a doctor speaking to students at a university, Firefly would give me, it wouldn't give me just all white male doctors. It would give me a woman doctor, African-American doctor, maybe a white male doctor, maybe Asian, female, something like that. It would give me some more culturally diverse images that it generates. So there are AI that are navigating the space that we're in now in a meaningful way. So yeah, that's if you have any questions, I can talk more, but I'm not sure.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, okay.
I think we should, yeah, we should open it up for questions before the hour. So,
Okay.
any thoughts, comments, questions, anything is fine.
Yeah.
I had experience actually with Firefly before Midjourney. So
Okay.
I'm making social justice-based Montessori materials, and I'm taking historical figures and then trying to move them through history. So show them as
Oh,
a
cool.
child. And then I tried Sojourner Truth in Firefly, and I was just so frustrated. It was like, I kept prompting it so specifically. And again, Sojourner Truth, there are images of Sojourner Truth.
Yeah.
It just would not, she was white. She was like, she was little with gray hair.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild. I had to keep, and then even with I finally got her to be African American, and I wanted her to have very dark skin, and it would not. And I think part of my theory with Firefly is that it feeds itself on Adobe stock
Yeah.
than anything. And I think that those images are used commercially, and you have a lot of problems with, with lightening skin and such. But this was wonderful. I learned so much from
Awesome.
this.
Great.
And then also those areas of bias are just, it's this is really great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure to do it. And yeah, let's connect afterwards, and then maybe I can try to work with Midjourney. I don't know if you're working with Midjourney too, but I can try to.
Yeah, I just started. Actually, I finally, I just have no money, so I didn't want to pay them, and we could get Firefly through Northeastern.
Yeah.
So I ended up just paying the $10, and I'm so happy that I
Okay,
did.
cool.
It works
Yeah.
so much better, and it
Yeah.
was so much faster.
Mm,
Um, one of the things with the people that you were showing, how it was blending,
mm,
Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass,
mm,
I found that if you put an image on with a character reference, it will
mm,
take every person in your image and
mm,
blend them.
mm.
So
Okay.
I had to I had like Maria Montessori, and then all the little kids looked like little ones of her. It was
Yeah.
it was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, that makes sense now looking back at those images, how like it was blending them. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely like it's such a great tool in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, but we have to really be cautious about what it presents us. And we can be so seduced by the quality of the images because like coming from an architecture background, like we focus a lot on like creating images and the architectural images that it creates, like it would take me so long. Like I could digitally model that space and I could create the materials and render it and create the lighting. It would take so long to do that. And it does it in seconds. So it's like there's the wow factor where you're like, oh my God, like this, I can't believe it just created these 4 images in 15 seconds that would, each one would take me like a month to do or something, you know? So it's like, we're so wowed by it. And that's the sort of, I think we're in the wow period of AI where it's like, we're so blown away by it that it's like, we have to be cautious about that because
Mhm.
we have to know exactly what goes along with the wow. And so that's kind of what I'm focusing on, you know. But
Mhm.
yeah.
The water usage, do you know what happens? So is it moving the water through a stream? Or are they putting it back into a water source that then is heated and then the fish can't breathe and
Yeah.
such?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a great article I read this morning in the New York Times that some of those images, let me see if I can find it. Hold on a second. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, hold on, let me share screen quick. And I'll just share screen again and then I'll show you. Yeah. So this is the article I looked at this morning, which was talking about that, how AI is changing the way the world builds computers. And down here, I think it shows an example. So these are standard servers. These are standard racks of computer servers. And it shows like how the sort of the piping for the water runs adjacent to the servers. Massachusetts, these are the concentration of centers around the world. And then I think it shows a example of let me see here. I thought it did. Yeah, here we go. So this room, this is a building and a computer server. This is a building of like a standard computer servers. So this room was once filled with racks of servers. So like every 5 feet or 6 feet, there would be another wall of servers. So all of those servers have been replaced by this one AI server in the back. So this one AI server uses as much computing, like electricity, that this whole room would have been filled with servers. So it's using such an enormous quantity of water. This article, I haven't made my way through the whole article, but let me see. Yeah, here it talks about it. Okay. Conventional data centers. Yeah, so this is sort of cold water flowing up and around. This is the sort of AI data center, the way it would work. The cold water actually has to flow right adjacent to it. It looks like it goes to an air conditioning unit, so maybe that heat that's used, that's captured in the hot water is then converted through an air conditioning cycle, and then the cold water is coming back. So yeah, I'm not sure 100%, and maybe it's different in different places how the water is how the water to cool the servers is used. But I'm still learning about it too. I don't consider myself an expert about this, but it's like I'm still learning a lot about it. So
Mhm. It's really good to know. I think that there's the novelty of the AI tools,
mm,
and what we're using them for isn't always necessary. And so
mhm,
I think
mhm,
that it's like a good, check on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. This has been great. This has been so great.
Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
This was perfect. All right. I'm gonna send you all the recording. Okay.
Yay.
All right. Thank you again. Take care.
Have a great day.
You too.